All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Erin, and I'm a quantitative UX researcher at Facebook. And my guess is right now the title of the talk is going through your head. WTF is UX research? And why would you guys as social personality psychologists want to do that? Hopefully in the next 20 minutes I'll convince you it's definitely something you want to consider. So a little bit about me. I'm part of the UT contingent of folks who applied. I just graduated in May of 2014. And my research in grad school was very much focused on the nonprofit sector. So how do we get people to volunteer more? How do we get them to donate? So yeah, a natural path might have been to follow Connor into the NGOs. But I ended up working at Facebook because actually you can have a really positive pro-social impact at Facebook. So I always knew that I liked applied outcomes, but I grew up in academia. Both my parents were communications professors, a little too close to home when I went into social psychology. And I really thought, I love bantering about theories and talking about these things, but when it comes time to publish something, I want to see a tangible impact from my work. I want to see some sort of outcome, and not an outcome where I write up something in a journal and hope somebody will cite it 10 years from now. So when I started looking into different applied jobs, I had no idea where to start. Where do you go with a social psychology PhD? The nonprofit sector was kind of the natural place I would go. Turned out someone else at UT had gotten an internship at Facebook and said, Erin, you really need to consider this. And I said, oh, you're crazy. Facebook's not going to hire me. I have no Facebook research. In fact, I've avoided doing any research on Facebook. And she said, no, we're hiring social psychologists. Give it a shot. And so here I am, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I do on a daily basis, and then give you a sense of what the heck UX research is and what life is like at Facebook. So just to begin, I do research on ads at Facebook, which may sound really boring. It's actually not really boring. I work for what's called the Ads Pages Research Team, which basically looks at businesses of all sizes, from your mom and pop cupcake shop up to Netflix, and tries to figure out how do they think about Facebook, how do they think about reaching people on Facebook, and how can we make their lives better and increase the chances that they will have people come into their shops. So it's really cool because nonprofits are actually considered businesses too. And so I actually work on my free time, I'm on an advisory board for a nonprofit called Wired International, and I get to help them figure out how do we reach people in West Africa who need training on Ebola. And it's the same process as if I put up an ad for a cupcake shop. So it's really cool stuff. So I'm happy to answer any questions about my daily job, but I want to give you a broad sense of what UX research is like, because ads is not the only thing we do at Facebook. Anything you can imagine Facebook works on, we have researchers doing something about it. So just to give you an overview of what I'll be talking about, what the heck is UX research? How do we use social personality psychology? And then I'll talk more about the organizational structure and culture of Facebook, things you might want to consider for your career, and how work-life balance works. It actually does, there is a balance there. So, and I'll ask anything that I missed, just ask at the end. I'm pretty much an open book about this stuff. So what is UX research? If you were to go to Google right now and type in UX research, user experience research, you'd get a ton of definitions. There's no consistency. And in fact, you'd probably see something that has nothing to do with social psychology. You'd see something about usability testing of applications. And you'd say, this has nothing to do with social psychology. Why would I want to do this? If you were to go to Facebook and look at their open jobs, you'd say, oh, okay, that might apply to me. And I'll tell you why. So user experience research. We are a set of about 80 of us right now, and we're growing incredibly. So if you're interested in jobs, please come talk to me. 80 social science PhDs, and we come from all kinds of disciplines, including anthropology, political science, economics, social psychology, communication. And we're using rigorous experimental or rigorous social science research methods to understand how 1.3 billion people use Facebook and how can we make their lives better, and how can we identify problems, social problems, cultural problems, and make Facebook a place where they feel like they can connect. And we're looking at things across countries, across devices. We're looking at not just individual differences that you're used to looking at, like personality and cultural differences, but also looking at what we call personas, different types of people that may not fall into the types of individual differences that we always think of. So again, you might think, well, user experience research is probably all putting people in front of Facebook and saying, how do you use this, and writing down stuff. Sure, we do that. I do that now, but it's really diverse. So we just put together this slide recently on this is all the different things we're doing at Facebook, and the methods really depend on the questions. So we're not sticking strictly to experimental design like we call that A/B testing in the real world. Depending on whether you want to get people's behaviors or their attitudes, we may do anything from interviews to eye tracking, data analysis, surveys, usability studies. It's all over the map. And what's great about Facebook is that all of us come from different backgrounds with different skill sets. So I was hired as a quantitative researcher, which means I'm supposed to be very good at the log analysis, the data mining, the A/B testing, even the surveys. But sometimes we need to just put someone in front of us, and so I get to talk to someone who has a really good background in ethnography and get tips on how do I talk to this person in the right way? How do I ask the right questions without leading them on? And sometimes I also get to teach people, like I was just telling the table this morning, a qualitative researcher may have never run a survey and have no idea what a confidence interval is. So I get to teach that. It's great. So, social psychology. What does this have to do with these users? Well, what do we study as social psychologists? Attitudes, behaviors, emotions, social interactions. Well, all those things apply to our users and on a really broad scale. So all of our background knowledge that we have can really apply to how we think about and study the way people are using Facebook. So we might directly apply social psychological concepts. So if we're trying to think about what should we show people on their newsfeed, we might think about, well, affective forecasting might influence the way people answer a survey, right? They may think they want to see all positive stuff in their timeline, and especially in the future. Or if they look back on their timelines a year from now, they may think, oh, I want to see this. But we know that they're not very accurate about that, so it may influence the way we survey them. Or if we design a new app, we've been designing a few apps at Facebook, we may think about how normative and informational social influence might impact adoption of it. And we might be able to use that for our advantage in the way we message. Or maybe we can, if things are not going well, figure out why people are not using it. As I've said, we do a lot of research with different methods, and one of the things that's great about social psychologists is we have a deep understanding of people and how they respond to things. So when it comes to designing a survey, we may think about Norbert Schwartz's paper on how the questions shape the answers and know what order matters. We know several data analysis techniques. You're right, we don't know the same stuff that political scientists know, but we have a really wide range of techniques that we know. We know how to correct for biases, experimenter expectations. We also know that from social psychology that we have to be creative with our methods sometimes, and that the standard 2x2 design may not always be the right way to answer a question. And so we get to use what we know, and we also get to learn new things. So a great example of this is there was a researcher at Facebook who needed to figure out how people think about a certain app. And so she had them do a Mad Libs about their favorite app and figured out what words people use so that later when we designed our app, we could see, are they using the same words that the people used in the Mad Libs? Brilliant. So that's more of the research side of things. Let's talk about the organizational structure and culture of Facebook. This is a complete 180 from anything you would have known in academia. So I'm going to make a lot of references to how this is totally different. And you can see these are posters that we actually have up at Facebook. These are some of our company values, and we very much stick to them. We hopefully don't break too many things anymore, though, because that's bad. So organizational structure. We're called a flat organization. This is very different from your standard hierarchy where you have, individuals, managers, directors, and, basically there's a whole chain of command. We have very few people at the higher levels. We have a lot of individuals who have high level of power and expertise, but they are not managers, they are not directors. In fact, individuals in general have a really high impact on company trajectory and goals. So as a good example of that, I ran some research last fall and showed that a new interface we were building was actually not working at all. And my research pretty much stopped them from launching. They are redesigning it completely. It hopefully will launch in the next couple of weeks. But that's huge, right? That we didn't send out something to millions of advertisers. We can also have impact on things like our own structure, how we work. So we've had a survey recently where we found out that some people in our organization were not happy with certain things. So I formed a task force to figure out how to fix that. And we just recommended to our VP different ways that we can improve people's feelings of being recognized and having impact as a culture. And just based on my little survey as a pretty fresh person at the company, I thought that was really great. In terms of how research works, we have a giant research team, and we do meet once a week, and we have all kinds of team bonding things, but the majority of what we're doing is actually embedded in product teams, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. But I may have one or two researchers that I collaborate with on a fairly frequent basis, but more often I'm working with a product manager who's overseeing a certain product, like, say, Timeline. Product designers who know a lot about how things should look and feel. Engineers who, can code that stuff. Other people who are much more fluent in behavioral data analysis and know how to grab it better than I do. We have this thing called content strategy, which is basically the language we use. And we all come together, we brainstorm, we give each other feedback on what they're doing, what I'm doing, and it's a wonderful process because any given product, one of us can't solve all of the problems, right? I can't build anything. I have some coding background, but not enough to be an engineer. I have no idea how to do product design. If you tell me to use Photoshop or whatever it is, my brain explodes. So it's just kind of like all the parts are making a whole. And it's really nice because I'm learning a lot about areas that I've never had exposure to. And I'm learning things about design principles and coding and content strategy, and I'm teaching them about research. So, more about our culture. One of the things that's completely different than academia is we move really fast. We can't take 2 years to design a product. People on Facebook want things, and they want things now. And so most of our research projects last a few days to a few weeks, depending on how extensive the project is. So you have to think fast, you have to design fast, you have to get feedback from people fast, and then once you have your data, you have to put together what we call a deck, which is a PowerPoint, really fast. I love this because I don't get to stew on things that work or don't work. If something doesn't work, we'll continue researching it. But I get to get exposed to a wide variety of things, a wide variety of projects, and I don't have to wait for a peer reviewer to tell me 6 months from now that my paper's been rejected. We do have peer review, I will tell you that, but I don't have to wait for 6 months for it. And if something is something I don't like, like I get asked to do research on something, good news is it's over in like 2 weeks. I can move on to something else. Another huge thing is that we focus on impact. And what that means is we're doing product research. Sure, we can have times where if we have just a general social psychological question, we can answer that, but mostly we want to know what product change is going to happen as the result of our research. Who's going to directly benefit from this? So it may mean something as small as we're going to move this button from here to here, or it may mean we're going to build this totally new experience on Facebook. Like launching the Groups app or Maybe we add new features to timeline or something like that. And there's a lot of things that we consider and a lot of things that don't go out because we find out from research that people will not like it. Another thing is that we're very encouraged to take risks at Facebook. Be bold is another one of our company values. What's great about that is you can fail and fail and fail, and that's seen as a good thing because that means you're trying things, you're learning things, you're growing professionally. A lot of the time, some of our best products are from people who just have a wacky idea and they go hack on it. And apparently, Newsfeed was a result of someone having a really wacky idea, and it ended up happening. We're very, very collaborative at Facebook. So, as I said, we're working with engineers, designers, product managers, but we're also very collaborative on the research team. So, my team on ads and pages sometimes will work with other people who are working. We have a couple of researchers doing stuff on like groups and how people buy and sell things in groups. And so we have this ability to connect across platforms and share ideas. And also we're mixed methods, right? So I don't know all of the qualitative things out there that there are to do. I'm learning them. Most of the qual researchers don't know the quant stuff. And a lot of our research really needs both perspectives. So we might do a survey and say, oh, something's really going wrong with this product. What is it? Well, then we bring people into the lab, and someone who's got more skills than I do at interviewing actually walks people through the product and says, oh, well, the reason people aren't liking it is because we've done X to the design, redo. So it's a really nice way to combine expertise and also get feedback from each other. The last one is be open. Feedback at Facebook is constant. We do peer critiques. I meet with someone once a week for all of my research designs. We have a team of people that meets once a week to critique each other. Our managers critique each other. We have twice annually, we have like official performance reviews. We have to be okay with being told we're doing something wrong. We do not do well with people who are defensive. Our goal at Facebook is to use feedback to grow. It's a little different than academia, where I think a lot of the time I felt like criticism was a reflection on me being a horrible human being. It was easy to feel that way. But at Facebook, you can't say that. You're not a horrible human being. In fact, they don't want you to feel that way. They want you to say, okay, you could use better skills in X. We want you to focus on that. Or it could be even feedback like, hey, we see you took a leadership role in this area. Why don't you consider taking on some more leadership or being a manager? And we also have Sheryl Sandberg from the top keeps telling us to have hard conversations, because as a company, if we're not open to feedback, a lot of tech companies explode because they get too political. They don't see when they're doing stuff wrong. So we're hoping to nip that in the bud a little bit by being honest at the outset and having everyone kind of open to, yeah, someone might tell you in a harsh way that things are not going well, and you just have to say, okay, I'm gonna work on that. All right, so career considerations. This picture is pretty much the most apt way to describe a Facebook career. It's windy, it's nonlinear, it can circle back. So because we're a flat organization, management is actually not considered a level above individual contributors. It's actually a parallel career track. And if you want to be a senior researcher, you can just continue moving up the research chain. If you want to go into management, there's a lot of resources for doing that. But if you go into management and you say, I just really miss playing with data, I don't really like managing people, they'll say, okay. And you can go back to being an individual, and like I said, some individuals are actually considered a higher level than some of the managers just because they're different tracks. As I've said, we're encouraged to take on new things and risks, so like I said, you could go into management and come back, but another thing that's really interesting is you don't have to stay in research. If you find something in the company that you're really excited about, you can go do it. So in the last couple of months, we had a really talented researcher decide that he's more interested in product design. So he had the opportunity to spend a month with one of the product design teams, and at the end he said, yeah, I really like this, and the team said, hey, we really like him, So now he's completely transitioned. I personally don't imagine leaving research, but I love the idea that it's flexible and that as I grow in my career at Facebook, I'm gaining even more skills that will help translate to a different job should I want that. All right, that finicky work-life balance thing. So we have a lot of benefits. So one of the things that's really different for me is that even most companies, there's vacation, but they really don't want you to take it. You're seen as lazy. I actually get told by my team lead on a regular basis, hey, you haven't taken vacation. Why aren't you on vacation? Like, they want you to go recharge. On campus, we have all kinds of amenities like doctors, dentists, haircuts, food and drinks, which this is all stuff that if you read about it, you're like, that's crazy, but once you're there, it's really wonderful. I live in San Francisco. Headquarters is about 30 miles away. I take a shuttle to work every day, which is awesome because California traffic is terrible. They have 4 months parental leave for new mothers and fathers, and they look at you funny if you don't take it. And there's just an active company-wide focus on how do we maintain work-life balance. And there's a kind of a motto, if you're working too many hours, it means you're probably being inefficient. And so they want to figure out how to make that better. Or if that means that you've got too much work, they'll try to lessen the workload. Some of the work benefits, I thought this was a total BS when I interviewed. I asked every person I interviewed with, if Facebook didn't exist tomorrow and you had to move on to something else, what would you miss the most? Unanimously, everyone said the people. And I said, that's no way. Like, people are people, they're cool. No, the people at Facebook are really awesome. They're smart, they're kind, they're people that you want to be friends with. It's a wonderful environment and supportive. I recently had a personal tragedy, and people I don't even know were asking me in meetings how I was holding up, just because word got around. In terms of research projects, we have a ton of resources. As the for-profit sector, we don't need to get government money. So we have a lot. So usually if there's a business need to do something, we have the money for it. I've never had to ask whether or not I should do something. And sometimes if we don't have the research capability within our own research pool, we'll go outside and find people to do it. So one project where they needed some people to do some segmentation of advertisers, they didn't have a quantitative person who could do it, so they went out and found a vendor for it. Another thing that's great is that there's a lot of support for pursuing your personal passions. So as I said, I studied nonprofit work when I was, pro-social behavior when I was in grad school, and right now I'm on the ads team, but there's all kinds of talk about what can I do within the ads team to pursue that love of helping people, volunteer and donate. And we actually have another team that's growing that I might be able to move to once I've been at the company a little while to be able to pursue that. There's no, you have to stay on this team because we have spots here. It's really about, the managers don't want anyone to be on a team that they really disdain. If they'd rather you stay at Facebook doing something you like. And we also have time to kind of pursue our own passions outside of work too. So being on this advisory board for a nonprofit, they find to be an awesome thing. They love it. And taking off time to go do that is a wonderful thing for them. Facebook's also a global company, and as such, we have to consider our users as a global, multicultural base. So a lot of our research is actually international. We don't have any researchers living internationally yet. Well, actually, that's not true. We had 2 people just move to London. But that means we travel a lot. So we've had researchers recently go to Indonesia, Brazil, Thailand, Philippines. Basically, if we identify that something's going differently somewhere, we'll send people on the ground to find out why. And we also do international translations of surveys, which is pretty cool. And this is kind of more like academia. We focus on what you do, not when and where you do it. So things are really flexible. We have a thing called Work From Home Wednesday, where I take advantage of that as much as I possibly can. But really the idea is that we want you to have impact. And so if you having impact means that you have to spend 2 weekdays at home because you have little kids, but then you work on the weekends, okay, that's great. If it means you work a shifted schedule, say you come in at noon and leave at 9, okay. Whatever makes you most comfortable to get your work done, that's what they want. And so we have people all over the map in terms of whether they come in early, work late, whether they have, kids that they have to attend to. They're really wonderful about families. And it's like academia, right? Work when you want, but this one really is, you have to put out something. You can't just say, I'm working from home, and then, 2 weeks later, they're like, where's your research? So I personally like being at the office because it's an open office environment, so we actually sit all in little pods together, and I'd rather be near people where I can just ask questions and brainstorm and pick. We do a lot of let's go into a conference room and start. We have dry erase board walls. We just write all over and brainstorm. So I'm at the office a lot. That's pretty much it. So if you want to learn more about the research team, we have all of our little profiles. You can see all the different social psychologists we have across the company. You can look at our user experience site, or you can also look at open jobs and internships. One of our recruiters sent me with a bunch of flyers, so if you have even the slightest bit of interest, you should come pick up a flyer from me and come talk to me. Because like I said, we're growing like crazy right now. And social psychologists are we love social psychologists. Cool. Any questions? Yeah.
How competitive would you say your jobs are?
Extremely. It's also a very grueling interview process. To give you a little sense of it, I had a recruiter interview, a research test, 2 phone interviews, and then an on-site interview where I gave a presentation and had 5 back-to-back one-on-one interviews. We're very focused on people who have intuitive sense about products. The applied part of this is really important to us. So we can talk more about that individually if you want, but we all come from this academic environment where we're trying to make broad swaths. And it is very difficult to now say, here's this concrete thing like Messenger, how would you study that? The good news about the interview process is that they're a little forgiving of us academics. They know that we need some help. And so, in fact, I was just telling the table this morning that I thought I was toast during one of my interviews because I got asked a question that I had no idea how to answer. And it turned out that there was some forgiveness for that. Once I got to Facebook, they give you a lot of mentorship to try to get you up to speed. So there's, again, a little forgiveness. And then they point out concretely when you're being too academic. Yeah.
What does that conversation look like? What is it that is too academic and not really kind of applies to that?
Sure. Jargon is really a big one. So one thing I had to learn, which I don't know how much I love it, but it makes sense, is so when you're presenting your research results to product managers, there's a wide variety of experience with statistics and a wide variety of caring. So I remember at one point I had a meeting with one of my team leads, and she said, if it's significant, put a star. Don't tell me what the p-value is. They don't care if it's 0.01 or 0.03. They just care if it's significant. So that kind of thing. And if you're going to cite some theories or papers, you have to put it in really plain English because not everyone's a social psychologist. So that's the kind of stuff that's too academic. And some of the questions, you have to really hone in on. I can think of an example of my questions was, I wanted to know in general, how do nonprofits use our ad tools? And they're like, that's great, but that's a really broad question. You need to narrow it down to one specific ad tool and one question about how they use that ad tool. Yeah.
Have you ever gotten any pushback when you're trying to give some research input or research insights to a team? Either they grudgingly accept or maybe outright refuse what you're trying to sell to them?
Yes and no. So we get a lot of pushback, but one of the things that's nice about Facebook is there's a culture of being really interested in research. Some teams are better than others. Different product managers have different levels of experience with research. Most of them, there's sort of like a confirmation bias type thing. If you tell them something they don't want to hear, they're usually going to push back. if it gets to a point where like you really believe in yourself and they're not listening, we have management to intervene, or higher level product managers. But for the most part, there's a really high level of respect and appreciation for research. And actually, the story of how research came to be was apparently when, I think it was when Newsfeed first started, people were picketing outside the office of Facebook because they were so upset that we had created a Newsfeed, and there was a huge mess. This was years ago, and our first researcher, Christina, said, we need a research team. And then we just kind of have grown and grown from there, and we prove our value over and over again when we're involved at all stages of the research process too. So it doesn't have to be that we're like measuring something that's already launched. We can be in the formative stages of should we build this? We could be in the middle of what's going on as we build this, or could be at the end of like, now we know things are really bad. And a lot of the time they're looking to us to tell them what's going on. There are times when we're data informed and not data driven because people really want something that is either like really hard for us to do technically or doesn't actually make sense. But for the most part, I would say 95% of my conversations with product managers and designers has been positive. Sure.
So I know this might not be a problem at Facebook and large companies, but at smaller companies and psychologists, they often ask to wear a lot of hats.
Yeah.
With UX research, a lot of times they're also expecting some kind of UX design experience. I don't know that those two are necessarily completely overlapping skill sets. Is that something that you've experienced with Facebook, or?
We don't need any design. We are first and foremost researchers. The designers are designers. Sure, we wear different hats in the sense that, we have to brainstorm about where we're going on a product, but we don't, the only coding I do is because I need to grab data from our database. I have zero design skills and zero design intuition, and I'm not asked to do any of that. They're very much, my manager keeps telling me, you're a quantitative UX researcher, do that. And that's different than other companies. And I think our appreciation for quantitative work is also pretty unique. Just in looking at a lot of UX jobs out there, there's a lot of focus on qualitative. And at Facebook, we're pretty much kind of 50-50 in terms of looking for qual and quant people. If you're going to go the quant route, though, I would recommend having at least some fluency in things like R or data manipulation. Experimental design is not necessarily considered a high-level quantitative skill at Facebook. It's a useful skill, but we are actually looking for people with broader methodological expertise than that. Yeah.
Since you're new, this
Yeah.
may not be a question you've thought that hard about, but do you see yourself staying at Facebook? Do people stay at Facebook for a long time, or are they, moving from tech company to tech company? What are your options?
Sure. That's a really great question. There are a few people who've moved. The main reasons that there are a couple people that have left recently. One left because the commute got too big. Another went to work for a small startup that she really believed in, and she'd been one of the founding members of the research team, and it was just time to do something new. Most people stay at Facebook, and one of the nice things is that if you're bored in your current position, they'll figure out a way to move you around in the company. There's so much to do. We think we're kind of 1% finished with what we need to do. I personally see myself being at Facebook for a really long time. I don't know, I'm thinking about the management track. I really like people. I miss mentoring grad students or undergrads. So I can see that happening, but there's more movement in the tech industry between engineers than researchers. But there are other companies that are definitely hiring social science PhDs. So I can think of like Google, Twitter, Uber, Airbnb. There's also medical tech industry UX jobs. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's definitely freedom to move if you want. I just don't want to. I really like where I'm at. I really believe in what Facebook is doing. And that's coming from someone who thought the corporations were stupid before that. I'm a bleeding heart, sorry. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you have to move fast, and
Yeah.
it's also okay to fail.
Yeah.
Please fail and move fast.
It depends on your level of failure. So if you're failing, Are you failing because you're sloppy? That's a problem. But if you're failing because, maybe you tried something and it didn't work, as long as what you're doing at moving fast is considered high quality. And we also, this is a little different than academia. We think done is better than perfect. And we know that we do make mistakes. We try to correct them as much as possible. When we're moving fast, though, we are getting a lot of feedback before we launch something. So I'm not going to launch a survey without having my team lead, maybe another researcher, and several product managers and designers. So if I fail, it's on all of us. But it's more of the, have you taken a calculated risk and a good risk? And yes, you've failed, but you've taken a good risk and you've grown. And certainly survey work is going to take less time to move, or more time to construct properly and run and analyze than if you're going to do one-on-one interviews with someone. I could get someone in the lab to talk to them tomorrow. I'm not going to run a survey and analyze it and present it tomorrow. That will take me a couple weeks. And we won't launch anything to the public without having a lot of eyes on it. Because the last thing we need is TechCrunch or the press to be like, Facebook launched this thing that's terrible. We don't like that. And it happens even when we're careful. Any other questions? Awesome. Feel free to come talk to me if you have any other questions and get a flyer. I've been told many times over to get rid of them.